life is like labor. It's a marathon. You know, we're constantly having to challenge ourselves and be in uncomfortable situations, whether you're pregnant or not, or planning to be a parent or not. Labor and birth has everything to do with life, right? So by a show of hands, if you feel comfortable raising your hand, how many people in this room know someone who's given birth? Probably all of us, right? Because we all came from someone, right? We all know of someone who's given birth, right? Maybe a friend, maybe a family member. And so birth itself really does affect all of us, right? Because we are all humans and we have to give birth in order to live. So today I'm going to be talking to you about my work. My name is Vanelia Arechica. This is a little bit of what I do. I'm a full spectrum doula. I'm very proud to be a birth worker of color because there's actually a very limited amount of birth workers of color. So representation is very important. I also encapsulate placentas. So that is a form of postpartum medicine. It actually comes from traditional Chinese medicine, in which the birth placenta, which it's considered the afterbirth, right after the baby comes out, the placenta is birthed. And every mammal actually consumes the placenta after birth, but humans don't, typically, right? But there's some cultures around the world who believe that the placenta does have healing properties that help promote breastfeeding, help eliminate postpartum depression, help balance out the hormones that are imbalanced after you give birth, because there's so much going on. And so I go ahead and prepare placentas for my clients in a capsule form. So it's kind of like a vitamin. They just take it after birth and they take it gradually, and it kind of just reintroduces the hormones and the rich placental blood back into their bodies after birth to help with their postpartum healing experience. So that's another thing that I offer. I'm also a childbirth educator, so I teach folks, like I mentioned earlier, in a group setting, kind of how to navigate the medical system, essentially, especially if you're giving birth in the hospital. And also just how to cope. So doing things kind of like what we did today, right? Checking in, doing some meditation, some deep breathing. Did anybody feel more relaxed while we were doing the check-in? Yeah, I see a lot of nods. Okay, good. So really just teaching folks how powerful our minds are when we are conscious of our bodies and our sensations and what we're feeling, how much easier it can be to be in our bodies. We're not as tense, we're not feeling as much pain, we're able to breathe better, but we have to be intentional about it, right? Because day to day, things just go so fast. And then I also provide Mexican traditional postpartum care. So after my families give birth, I will come to their homes if they need that support, come to their homes, cook them soups, give them vaginal steams, herbal baths, massage. We implement the use of a faja. So if you've ever heard of a faja, it's kind of like not like a waist trainer, but it's meant to support the abdomen after birth. And that is a really great way to just make the healing process a lot more smooth for the birthing person. So implementing a lot of traditional practices from my heritage, which is Mexican and culture. And then on top of that, I'm also a mother. I homeschool my daughter, and I'm also a musician. So I try to implement music into my work as well, and just as a form of medicine to my clients. So I'm going to talk to you today about a little bit about what I do. So my daughter, her name is Corey Ray. I gave birth to her in 2011. I was in college when I got pregnant. Actually, I was in my 4th year of college, and I had no idea what I was doing with my life. I was super confused and didn't have any of my prerequisites for any major. I kept switching around. I was just super lost. And I got pregnant really unexpectedly one night, having too much fun, hanging out, and I'm not ashamed to say it, because it's the truth. And I think at that point in my life, I was just so lost that I was like, all right, this is what we're doing now, this is where my life is headed, and let's do that, And I realized not a lot of folks feel that way, especially if you're on track to graduating and you have these goals that you want to accomplish. But I was kind of like, all right, I'm up for this challenge. I'm down to have this baby and still get my degree, and I'll figure it out, somehow, some way. I got really lucky. I had a lot of support from my family and my community and my friends. And so I gave birth, and it was an amazing experience. I think my status as a student really drew me into learning about childbirth. because I was a student, I was like, I need to take a class. Like that makes the most logical sense, you know? So I found a class and I took it. My mom came with me. I was a single mom. And it was amazing and I learned a lot. And I found myself teaching people as I was taking these classes. I was sharing the knowledge. I wasn't hoarding it to myself. I was just so passionate about sharing what I was learning. And so after I gave birth, I was just kind of like, you know what? Like, why don't my friends know about this? Why doesn't my family know that birth doesn't have to be scary? That it can actually be a really empowering, enjoyable experience. In fact, it should be, but it's not that birth is scary, it's that the medical system is scary to a lot of us, right? A lot of us, like, if you've ever been in a hospital, it's usually not for a good reason, right? So starting to think more about how fear plays into our birth experiences. I started to learn more about that and be more interested in it. And so I started doing more work. I took a doula training, I took a childbirth educator training, and I started learning more, teaching more. And so over the years, I've just accumulated a lot of experience as a birth doula, as a childbirth educator, again, encapsulating placentas, learning more holistic and alternative medicine and healing methods. And then in 2017, I became a full spectrum doula, which is a little bit different in that it's not centered just on birth. It actually includes while women care as far as like pregnancy loss or abortion support, miscarriage, stillbirth, things like that. So not just when you give birth, but when from conception into whatever form that pregnancy may take, right? And so really being there to help people who, you know, birthing people, pregnant people, give them the support that they need no matter what they decide to do with a child or the plantation of a fetus. So, and then like I mentioned, doing postpartum care after when the baby comes home with the mom and really taking care of moms so that they can take care of their babies, right? So the motto for my company is called Mami Amor Birth. And so I always say love to the mother, for the mother, with the mother, love from one mommy to another, because I know what it's like to you know, give birth and just need support. So that's a little bit about my work in a nutshell. I also want to share a little bit of my story with you all, just so you have an idea of how my story has influenced my work and my wanting to do this work. So these are some pictures of me with my family. I grew up not far from here, east of East LA in Montebello. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I was very lucky, honestly, like, I can't complain about my childhood very much, you know? Like, my parents worked really hard. We were a working class family. They did their best to make sure we always had our basic needs met, you know, housing, food, some extracurricular activities. You know, I danced folklorico my whole life and played sports, and so I'm very grateful for my upbringing. It's interesting that my work went where it went because I never thought my life would lead me here, you know, not only like supporting women, supporting families, but also being an entrepreneur. That's not something I ever envisioned for myself. Like, when I look at these pictures, I'm like, I never knew that little baby would turn into an entrepreneur of multiple businesses, you know, but that's where life has led me. And I really do think it's because of my parents, because like the good and the bad that they taught me, it's really shaped who I am and what led me to this work. So I have to give great gratitude for where I came from in order to explain to you what I do now. And then moving forward into my adult life, I told you kind of about my story with getting pregnant in college, being very young, being a single mom. I gave birth to my daughter, Corey Ray, in 2011. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. She has literally been the best thing that ever happened to me, you know, and she has everything to do with why I do the work that I do, because she's gonna be the next one, you know, if she decides to have a child or decides not to have a child, or what if she needs to have an abortion one day, you know, like I want her to have access to quality health care without bias, without racism, without abuse. And these are actual things that we're facing right now when supporting women in the hospital setting. So I'll go more into that in a second, but I always tell people, like, if it wasn't for her, like, I wouldn't be who I am. I really don't know who I would be, you know, I'm kind of afraid of who I would be. And so she's just like my daily reminder to keep pushing, keep moving, keep sharing, keep teaching, keep learning. You know, I'm not an expert. I'm also a student forever. I will always be a student, but I also teach people what I learn. I think that's the beauty of knowledge, is that it's not meant to be kept to yourself, you know, it's meant to be shared and passed on. So that's what I'm doing with her. And these are just some pictures of things we like to do together. Just, we live in Long Beach, so we enjoy the beach a lot. And so going into my work, people are always like, what is a doula? What does that even mean? Doula is actually a Greek word for a woman who serves. So it's been determined differently. It could be like a servant woman, a woman who serves, essentially someone who is there to help the birthing person, mother helper. Traditionally, the work that we've done has been done forever. You know, in history, we haven't birthed. We have moments in birth. So as primal beings, we tend to want to be alone because that's where we feel most connected to ourselves. But then in times of need, we need that support. We need the support of other experienced women, other experienced people who've given birth. And so doula work is not new. It just has a name now. It's always been done. Now it has a name. Somebody coined the term doula to be associated with birth and labor support. So here we have just a brief explanation of what I do as a doula. I'm a non-medical professional, so I don't do anything medical. I don't assess, I don't chart, I don't do anything like that. I am solely there to support the family and everything else that is not medical. So that comes in the form of providing evidence-based information on labor, birth, and parenting sometimes, because it goes far beyond just the birth experience, right? I always say that when someone gives birth, they're not just birthing a child, but they're rebirthing themselves. And so a lot of times we need that support as we move forward into the parenting experience. And then another added layer of the work that I do personally, so the first two are more like general rules of thumb for doulas, right? Doulas in general. But one thing that I do, and I know others in my community are also doing, is being more of a protector. And so the protection aspect is really important because, like I said, there's a lot of abuse that's happening right now in the medical system. I think overall, because of the political climate, there's a lot of abuse happening all over the world, right? And of course, there always has been a lot of things happening around the world, but primarily in hospital settings where people are giving birth, we're experiencing a lot of trauma. And because of that, a lot of people are hiring doulas to be their advocates, to help them find their voice, to remind them to use their voice. And that's what we do. And we also protect the energy in the space. So sometimes that means bringing like battery powered candles that I bring to births, and like I have a little diffuser where I put essential oils and just turn the lights down, and it smells good and it feels relaxing. It feels like you're in a spa, you know, it feels like just very good, playing nice and relaxing music. A lot of times the nurses at the hospitals that I go to are like, they walk in and they're like, oh, this is nice. Like I want to stay in this room, you know, because it feels good. And that's what helps my clients progress. That's what helps them do better and feel better and stay more relaxed. So that's kind of what that looks like. And then in some cases, like my clients will tell me, you know, like I have a really bad relationship with my mom, but I know that I need the guidance of like a strong female figure or like a strong maternal figure. And so that's what they're needing. That's what they're wanting for the person that's supporting them. In this case, that would be me, right? And so these are just kind of some of the roles that I play with certain clients, a parent, a friend, an amiga or amigo, whoever, cheerleader. Sometimes my biggest job is just being like, you got this, like, you know, like, you got this, you're breathing, you're doing great. Just reassurance is really important. And just being a loving support person. And that's kind of where I integrate music into my work. Because sometimes in labor, we hit a point where we just want to curl up and like a baby and we just want our moms, you know? And some of you are nodding your heads like maybe you've experienced that or maybe you know someone who has. And again, if we have a complicated relationship with our maternal figures, maybe that's not the person we really need, but it's more of that bond, you know, like that feeling of like, I'm being protected right now. And sometimes that's braiding your hair in labor, you know, or combing your hair, or massaging your leg, or just, you know, kissing your cheek and rubbing your head, like those very tender moments that we need as human beings in order to support each other. So that's kind of a little bit what I do, and that's a picture of me supporting one of my friends, Leslie, our mutual friend. She had a home birth, All right, so here are a couple of things I don't do, and doulas should not do, right? So deliver babies. We're not midwives, we're not OBGYN, so we are not supposed to be delivering babies, right? There's a joke in the birth community, like, babies aren't pizzas, like you don't deliver them anyway, like women, people birth babies, we don't deliver babies, you know? So just changing the way we talk about birth and labor too, you know, and just, it is, language is everything, so making it more of an empowering experience rather than a like, oh, you just caught the baby and gave it to the parent, you know? So I don't deliver babies, we don't deliver babies. Sometimes every once in a while you'll get a car situation where a baby's born in the car, in which case you could try to help the family as much as possible. I have a couple friends who've caught babies, I haven't yet. And one rule of thumb they've always shared is the first thing you want to do is if a baby is coming and you're not in the hospital or the place where you want to give birth, immediately rip your shirt off and catch the baby with your shirt because they're super slippery. So it happens sometimes, you know, and you want to be prepared. We do not administer cervical exams. So cervical exam is when a sterile glove is placed into the vagina and all the way up to the cervix to check and see if the dilation is happening, if the cervix is opening for the baby to drop down. We do not do that. So again, non-medical support. We also do not speak on behalf of a family, right? So as a doula, it's my job to ask questions and give suggestions. It's never my job to be like, hey, this is what you should do, or hey, doctor, they don't want to do that. You know, it's really about empowering the family to speak up for themselves. And I really love that concept of my work because it's like any type of healing. There's I think I read something somewhere that said like the greatest healers are the ones that don't make you think they can just give you a magic pill and you can take it and your problems will be solved, right? They're the ones who teach you how to heal yourself. They give you the tools and it's up to you to implement those tools. And so that's kind of what we're doing here. We're not there to make it the perfect experience ever. We're there to make it better, of course, but it's up to them to take control of their experience and speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves. And I'm there to assist them in that and remind them that they can and how to and which questions to ask. Again, I don't diagnose or treat patients and I don't tell them what to do. So this is another image of a different birth experience in a hospital setting. You can kind of see like the mom is surrounded by care providers. In this case, her baby's heart rate was dropping, and so they asked her quickly to get on all fours to see if it would affect the baby's heart rate. And I'm just in there whispering, you know, to her, like, it's okay, it's gonna be fine. They're just kind of explaining it, you know, because they came in with a lot of urgency, like, you know, the monitor's down, we can't see the baby's heart rate, you need to flip over now. And it's scary, it's triggering. It's like, oh my God, something's wrong with my baby, you know? And so I'm just there to ground her, you know, and just be like, it's okay. This is why they're shouting. There's urgency, but this is why. And it usually helps make folks feel better. So that's a little snippet of, you know, the work itself, primarily doula work, because I do a lot of things, but I wanted to center in specifically on labor and birth support. And my why, I can't tell you about my why and why I do this work without giving gratitude to my lineage. This is my grandma Lucy and my mom and my daughter and myself. And my grandma passed away this year in March. She was an amazing person. She is the matriarch of our family. She's kind of the reason that our family is so tight-knit. She's the reason that our family is a lot of really strong women. She went through a lot in her life, mostly on her own. Had 6 children, and she was always like my biggest supporter. She was always like, Mija, like the work you're doing is so important. Like I wish I had someone like that when I was giving birth, you know, and keep doing it. Like I know you're struggling, but like you just keep doing it. Like that's what you need to be doing. And it's really special because I feel her still like guiding me. I feel her protecting me and making sure I'm staying on path, you know? So she and my mom and my daughter, they're all part of my why, because I do this work to help heal generational trauma, really. Generational violence and generational trauma through the birth experience. Because when a baby's born, like there's already so much violence in the world. We don't want the first time this child enters the world to be a violent situation either, you know? And we'll talk about why that's a concern in a second. But first and foremost, my family is the reason I do this, because I come from a line of women who've given birth and who've had abuse, and I'm giving birth to the next generation, and I want it to be a good experience for her and everyone, her peers, my daughter's peers as well. The other why is my clients. My clients are people that I've asked for. When I first started doula work, I would just kind of work with whoever, whoever would pay me to work with them, really. But the more work I do, the more I see that I'm not the doula for everyone, and not everyone is my ideal client. So the more that I, share my story, share parts of myself on a personal level with folks, the more people come to me who are like my people, they get what I'm doing. They understand where I come from. They understand my language. They understand my passion. Basically, there's all of these things that we're taking into consideration when I'm thinking about why I continue to do this work, right? And it's because people in my community are being abused. This is really a social justice issue. It's a birth justice issue. It's a human issue. Again, I'm highlighting these systemic issues that we're having, right, in the birth world, and the birth world is everyday life, right? And people are giving birth every day. And so what are the solutions to those problems we're having, right? How does my work as a doula and others in the community, how does their work affect these systemic issues we're having? First and foremost, what I've tried to do is institute more community care. So instead of every time you have an ailment, every time you have a cough, you run straight to the doctors, we try to implement more of a support system, using more holistic measures for treating, your everyday ailments and whatnot. But also having a safe space to be with other people to get ideas for ways to help ourselves, right? So just being in community with other folks, with other people who are trying to live their lives as best as they can, but not necessarily fully putting our whole, lives in the hands of the medical industry. Because I'm not trying to bash the medical industry. I think that what they do is good for when we need that extra support, right? I mean, sometimes we need interventions to help make us healthy again. But with those interventions come side effects most of the time. So if we can do preventative care, we can maintain ourselves preventatively so that we don't have to get to that point, that's where community care comes in. So really trying to build a healthy community from the inside out. And so what that looks like to me is having access to education, to information. My friend and I, we opened a community space about a year ago called La Fuente, where we host workshops for everyone. I mean, we have everything from meditation circles to breastfeeding support groups to parent support groups, story time. I teach childbirth classes there. My partner also teaches childbirth classes there. We have lots of babies running around. It's a really great time. And really what we're doing is building a community. We're building a community of people that can lean on each other in times of need. And we're also giving them a space outside of the medical industry to seek support that is still evidence-based and accessible. And so we offer donation-based parent support groups. We have the Spanish story time, like I said, the breastfeeding groups. And it's been really amazing seeing how having those meetings, having these groups really benefits the family as a whole, because they don't feel like they're alone. They don't feel like they're alone, and they feel like they have a safe place to come and be themselves and ask questions. Whereas a lot of times in the medical side, they get intimidated or bullied into doing things they don't want to do, like vaccinating all at once, for example, or not vaccinating, or whatever their questions are, their options. So one more thing I want to tie in before we start with the Q&A is just that my work specifically, and others out there, I'd like to try to implement a ceremonial aspect to the birth process, because it's a sacred event, right? I mean, we're bringing a human into the world, and regardless of your religious beliefs or spiritual practices, I think we could all agree that that's pretty amazing, pretty out of this world, right? And so just integrating some traditional aspects of spirituality, pampering the pregnant person as they get ready to give birth, giving them honor, giving them love, massaging them, being intimate and sensual, and really connecting as other women who've also given birth. Like, it's like that rite of passage, you know what it's like, you know those feelings of nervousness, you know those unexpected questions, you know those questions of like what's going to happen, those unexpected situations that your birth could take. I try to encourage my clients, whether it's an altar or just like some trinkets or pictures or things that they love that make them feel good, to bring it with them to their birth, to have it set up in their room where they're going to be laboring, to really draw in positive energy and positive intentions for their experience. And also just trying to make sure that the birthing person is always feeling safe. Because again, as mammals, if we don't feel safe, if we feel like there's a threat or danger, we're not going to progress. We're going to close up. Our bodies know intuitively to close up when we don't feel safe. And then also just encouraging my clients to trust their intuition. I'm not there to be like Mary Poppins with my bag of goodies and just solve all your problems. I'm there to remind you that you already know what to do. You just have to trust that. And in order to trust that, we have to kind of silence all of our busy thoughts, all of our fears and worries, and allow ourselves to really listen to our inner voice and allow ourselves to do what we need to do to get through it. So that's pretty much what I do. I would like to invite you all, if you want to stay connected and just follow the work that we're doing, you can follow me on social media at Mami Amor Birth or La Fuente LB, which is the name of our community space in Long Beach. Well, thank you all so much for having me.